Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this virtual musical tour of Tor House. I have a lot of music and poems and images to share with you today. My husband, Bob Armstead, is going to help me with that. And you're looking at, right now, the view out the ocean window when you're sitting at the piano at Tor House, which is quite a magical experience. I'm fortunate enough to be allowed to go there once a week and play the piano, practice in that sanctuary of silence and beauty and intellectual rigor, and also to do tours and concerts. So let me give you a quick introduction to the history of Tor House. This is taken from Scenic Drive, the cottage, the wall, and the tower as they appear today. Those huge cypress trees and the eucalyptus in the back are 100 years old, and they were planted by Jeffers. He planted over 2,000 trees and hand watered them through the dry season. You can see the house, the dining room, which was added after the tower. The tower took 5 years to complete. Then Una got the bright idea they needed a dining room for their teenage boys to have somewhere to dance and entertain. She wanted a dining room that looked like an English roadhouse inn. And then after the dining room was completed, they started the East Wing, where the second and third generation of Jeffers lived until Robin died in 1962. From the driveway, looking into the tower, you can see Una's room, the little Gothic slice of a window up to the 4th floor lookout point, where Robin went every night before going to bed. Lovely English style garden was added by daughter-in-law Lee Jeffers. They had just let it go wild with wildflowers. The garden and approaching the front door, the dining room, and those long windows with the French doors you see to the far right, that was originally the first garage that Jeffers built, where he learned how to make a Roman arch by looking it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica, 1911 edition, and did it single-handedly. Later, after Una died in 1950, it was transformed into a kitchen, and the tiny kitchen became kind of a book room, library room. The parlor or sitting room, almost exactly as it was. You see the redwood board and bat, siding the original windows with the original glass, very wavy, single pane glass, single wall construction, low ceiling to keep the heat in, and that magnificent Steinway grand piano, which has stood there for over 100 years. It was basically a box of rust until Russell Brown did a complete redo on it a couple of years ago, replaced all the strings, all the hammers, and got rid of the rust, polished it and cleaned it up. And now it's a very respectable Steinway instrument. And we have the pleasure of giving concerts and musical tours there. And this is the instrument that was played by Ansel Adams and George Gershwin and Samuel Barber. Una's little chairs, they're low to the floor. She was only 5 feet tall. And she sat by the fireplace and sewed while Robin read every evening for a couple of hours. Portraits of the boys when they were 10 years old, just over the table there. Guest bedroom, where Robin died in 1962, or the famous poem about the guest bedroom. We're going quick. This is whirlwind. The dining room with Una's grandmother's spinning wheel from Ireland and the original furnishings, the long oak table and benches. Look at the walls with the soot stained. Every fireplace in this house belched smoke, and the walls and the ceilings are covered with it. Robin built this room single-handedly by himself. It took him another 5 years to do it. The tower at sunset, this is lovely with the little green glass glowing in the top levels. This was Una's sanctuary. It was his love gift to her, as she was obsessed with all things Irish and Irish towers, mythology, music, and poets. There's the inside of the tower. The bottom level, there's a room which they've moved Robin's desk and chair into. They weren't originally there. It was kind of a playroom fort for the boys. And her room on the second level has little Gothic arches and Gothic windows, paneled in mahogany by a guy who specialized in sailboat interiors. And she had a melodeon up there. She would go there and play for her own pleasure, maybe when she needed to get away from the boys and noise and housework or guests that were unwelcome, and retreat. She could have a friend. There's just room for 2 women to sit up there and talk and have tea. Tiny fireplace, again, very smoky. and the Spanish daybed that she found in a secondhand store and refinished herself. She and Robin spent about 40 hours doing the refinishing job on that. And the melodeon is now in the house. It now sits in the guest bedroom. You'll see a picture of that soon. And one more, we've got tower rooms, and now the view from the top of the tower, looking down to scenic. And this is what Robin loved. His favorite place was to be up at the top there. And every night, smoke a last cigarette, check the tides, check the stars, and see where the constellations are before he retired for the night. This is Robin as a boy with his mother, Annie Tuttle. She was very musical. She played the organ and the piano, and a lot of her music books are still in the archives at Tor House with her signature on them. And this was fairly upper intermediate to advanced level repertoire for piano and organ. She gave her music to Una, who was also at a similar level of accomplishment. And there we are, Una, kind of a high school graduation picture. And then the last one, her graduation from USC in 1908. By that time, she and Robin had met in their German class in 1906. We may have been still friends at this point, or the friendship may have progressed. Notice her long, long braid. She never cut that hair. Her whole life, she wound it around her head as a kind of crown. There's Una and her first husband, Teddy, probably playing either the Bach Gounod Ave Maria or Saint-Saëns the Swan would be my best two guesses for that. That is the Steinway that now sits in Tor House. Teddy bought it for her as a love gift shortly after they were married. It came from the Sherman Clay store in San Francisco, which then burned up completely in the 1906 earthquake. So it's one of very few instruments that survived from the Bay Area from that time, because they had moved it to their lovely home in Los Angeles, where she enjoyed the life of a wealthy attorney's socialite wife. And if you notice the mullioned windows and the hardwood floors, when Teddy built his stone house in Carmel down the block from the Jeffers, he used the same architectural elements. It's kind of a copycat house. And he gave her the piano a second time after they moved in 1919. This extraordinary woman with her dangerous combinations of gifts of brains, beauty, and social charm attracted both men and women, and she made a profound, lasting impression on both. Okay, now it's time for Tu Canidia. Here's a poem Robin wrote in 1912. They were on again, off again, certainly from 1910 until 1913.
To Canidia. Nay, is there need of witchcraft still, witch girl, to break my stronger will? Of strange enchantments and of song in far pine forests all night long? What use is there of woven charms? Have I not held you in my arms? And is there stronger spell than this, the burning memory of your kiss? Or mightier charm can you prepare than the long wonder of your hair? But though the madness of desire burn body and spirit as with fire, though the wild longing never cease to seek you out and find out peace, I, being more strong than you, no more will set my feet to seek your door.
But of course, that was not the end of that story. Robin's first gift to Una is this tiny etching. It's about 6 by 8 of a stone house by a rocky seashore in a strong wind. Look at the bent trees and the overcast skies. I don't know exactly the year, but it was around between 1910 and 1912. This first gift of his is a premonition, a prophecy of what is to come. And they will build a stone house by a windswept rocky seashore. And there are the newlyweds, finally married. The divorce was final on August 1st, 1913. And the following day, Una and Robin were married, and Teddy and his second wife, Edith, were married. and then they went on honeymoon together in La Jolla. They wanted to go to Lyme Regis in Cornwall and get away from the current scandal that had been in the front page of the LA Times, but she became pregnant with a daughter who died after one day. That delayed the departure by a year, and the next year, 1914, World War I was starting. So again, they could not escape to Cornwall. A friend suggested there's this place up the coast called Carmel. Neither of them had heard of it. So on the recommendation of a friend, they took the train up to Monterey and then a horse-drawn stagecoach over the hill to Carmel and found what they called their inevitable place. There's Carmel as it looked about the time they came. There were just scattered houses, somewhere between 300 and 500 people living. It was kind of like a hippie enclave in those days. People were living in tents and tree houses and handmade log cabins. The day that they arrived, they immediately found a real estate agent and rented a log cabin at 4th and Monteverde. No trees either. Look at that windswept grass right down to the sand dunes. They loved this wild, wild place. There's the log cabin in 1914 with Robin's mother on the right there. And there's how it looked. Well, it's worse than that now. The roof has fallen in and it's a condemned property, but the poor guy who bought it is condemned to rebuild it as close to authentically as he can. He has my sympathy for that because they only lived there about a year. When the twins were born in 1916, they moved to a larger rental house a couple blocks away. But they dreamed of owning their own land and building their own house. There's 1915, Robin and one of the English bulldogs, Billy, you can just make out a white blur to the left there. This is what is now today Scenic Drive, and those rocks sticking out of the hill are the site of Tor House. Tor meaning rocky outcrop. And there's Teddy with his second wife, Edith, who's all of 17 years old. She and Una became very good friends. Una was like a big sister to her. They were very close. And Robin, at the site, the Tor House rocks, where they often went at sunset to picnic and drink a bottle of wine, watch the sun go down. The rental house, Trethaway on Lopez. Now it's no longer recognizable. You can't find it. It's been torn down or completely renovated, with the little boys and the goats. At the site of Tor House with the dog, and then later with the boys. The Scenic Drive is still a dirt track, as was Ocean Avenue at this time. From Tor House, 1919, looking towards Carmel. And there, the house has begun. Mike Murphy started it. Robin apprenticed himself for about $4 a day to save costs, speed up the construction, and learn how to work with stones. The stones were all hauled up from the beach just below. Moving day. There's Teddy on moving day, being a good friend. He was really a good ex-husband. The dog and the boys, who are now 3 years old. This dream of theirs, 1919, moving in. There's a wonderful song, a pop song that was also published in 1919 called Let the Rest of the World Go By. And it perfectly captures that moment of wanting to escape and make your own life in a beautiful, wild place.
Is the struggle and strife we find in this life really worthwhile after all? I've been wishing today I could just run away out where the west winds call. With someone like you, a pal good and true, I'd like to leave it all behind and go and find some place that's known to God alone, just a spot to call our sky. We'll build a sweet little nest somewhere in the west, and let the rest of the world go by.
And let the rest of the world go by, they did. They made their own life there. A splendid life. The inscription over the fireplace in Una's room in the tower reads, Ipsi sibi somnia fingunt, which means they fashion their dreams for themselves. And that's a quotation from Virgil's Eclogues, which so perfectly fit with both their educations in the classics, European literature, and everything Irish. So they did fashion their dreams for themselves in that house. After moving day, the piano appeared soon after that, was carried in on the back of one man. And Robin set to work immediately. And this was the pattern of their life. It was a life of incredible discipline. Every morning after breakfast, writing poetry in the upstairs attic kind of study that he had. He had a desk and a chair that did not face out the window, faced the wall to help him to concentrate. And he paced up and down up there. And if Una felt that it was too quiet and he may have fallen asleep at his desk, she had a broom and she would go poke, poke, poke on the ceiling. Hey, are you awake? Get back to work. Until lunchtime. After lunch became the hard physical labor of moving stones, doing the building, planting the trees, watering the trees, cutting the firewood, and every other kind of work, because they tried to be as self-sufficient as possible. They were like Humboldt County hippies, ahead of their time. She was making her own clothes, even her own shoes, the boys' clothes, sewing the boys' moccasins, and homeschooling the boys. It's staggering the amount of work they took on. And then living in this house with no electricity, only fireplace heat and candlelight and kerosene lamps. After dinner, when they're all exhausted, he read aloud to them every night for 2 hours, and she sometimes sang, especially Irish music, Irish ballads, and her classical repertoire on the piano. There's the tower getting started. It took him about 1 year for each level of the tower, and he had these ramps like the Egyptian pyramids to carry the stones up to the top until it got just too steep and too high, and then he used to block and tackle for the final top, which is over 40 feet high. There it is, finished on a beautiful, appropriately stormy day with that quotation from Virgil, which is carved into the wood over the fireplace in her room. And with the boys, the boys look now 10, 12 years old. So this would be about the time of the first trip to Ireland. And Una was obsessed with Ireland. Tor House in the Mist, this looks like Irish weather. That's a modern picture. I think I may have taken that one. Bob has a reading about why she was so obsessed with Ireland. 2 of her grandparents were born in Ireland, and her Irish grandfather had taught her music, first of all, but she loved Irish poets and mythology.
We were poor and had a house to make and 2 sons to bring up, so that it was 17 years after our marriage before Una felt that she could indulge her dear desire to go traveling again in Ireland. She had been there a few rapid weeks in 1912, but now in 29, she had a family to take along, and I think it was a joyous burden to her. As for me, I went under protest. I had never been in Ireland, but when I was a child, my father used to lug me to Europe every summer, and then left me 4 years in Swiss schools. I thought I'd done my stint. It was Una's invincible energy that lighted our course like a torch and like a scourge. Let me quote from her diary in Donegal. Donnan, by 20 minutes our elder son, dreamed it was the night before we left home. A howling was heard outside the door. Robin rushed out and soon came back, his arm covered with blood. A mad dog had bitten him. Donnan got worried and said, maybe father ought to have a Pasteur treatment. Una said, yes, I wish he might, but it's impossible. Tomorrow we start for Ireland. Why did Una so love Ireland? Partly because 2 of her grandparents were born there. partly because the bogs and the mountains are amazingly beautiful, and the Irish round towers, those 100-foot tall stone cylinders scattered all about the country, are beautiful and ancient and mysterious, standing on the margin between history and prehistory. Una wanted to visit every one of them. But there was another reason for Una's love of Ireland, and a more compelling one. It was because Yeats and a few others, even George Moore in his fashion, had made Ireland magical. Una had introductory letters to Yeats and others, but the letters were never delivered. The landscape was what she desired. We had read the poems.
On the back of your handout that you got, the introductory handout, there was an image of a page from her book of Gaelic airs. And in it, she has written out a major scale and a Celtic scale, and then some sketches by Robin. I'll just play that for you. It's not so mysterious. Here's a major scale. And here's the Celtic scale, which is really just pentatonic. If you play the black keys with the piano, that's the Celtic scale. It's a pentatonic scale. And she wrote out almost 200 Gaelic airs in a book she started in 1922. Here's you can see the sketches are by Robin. Every page is illustrated. It's her very large notehead kind of childish script. But what's amazing about this is it was a family effort. The boys contributed drawings, Robin contributed drawings, and she copied out all this music for years before the first trip to Ireland, and their little Irish harps and scenes of ruins, and also Irish artifacts from their home, like the baby cradle and the spinning wheel, all make appearances, and of course unicorns everywhere. Here's an Irish tune early in her volume called Una. Think of it, Una for unicorn, and it is in this Celtic pentatonic scale. Oh, charming. And one more, an old tune with a refrain, Bana Lana. That one is so interesting because it doesn't resolve. It ends on the subdominant there. And then, of course, there are the well-known Irish songs like Down by the Sally Gardens, which we'll do for you, with words written by William Butler Yeats. There are two words in the lyrics that might be a little unfamiliar. Sally Gardens means down by the willow trees. And a weir is an earthen dam or a levee.
Down by the Sally Gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow white feet. She bid me take love in on my leaning shoulder, she laid her snow-white hand. She bid me take her life easy, as the grass grows on the wheels. But I was young and foolish, and now am full of tears.
Most Irish songs have a sad ending. They're really working to evoke tears. If you think they fall in the three categories. There's a lullaby and merry dancing music, and these sad, sad ballads and laments. So, of course, the Yeats, Now I'm Full of Tears, right? It ended badly. And another of the most famous Irish songs, Danny Boy, is a father speaking to his son from the grave. If that doesn't get you, as classic Irish song. So we'll do Danny Boy for you now.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the flowers are falling. 'Tis you must go, and I must go. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so.
That's a beautiful portrait of her, 1927 and 32, the famous Weston portrait. That's the year he was on Time magazine cover. There it is, April 4th, 1932, looking harder than granite himself. And the Edward Weston portrait. Nice quotation about his philosophy: one existence, one music, one organism, one life, one God, star, fire, and rock strength. I gave you a little bit of information about his philosophy in the handout that you received, his inhumanism, which James Carman, the preeminent scholar on Jeffers, says is his huge accomplishment, is to take all of Western civilization's literature, philosophy, and religion and stand it on its head and turn it inside out. So instead of humanism, where the human race is the apex of all development and achievement, he says we are nothing. We are fruit flies in the grand scheme of things. We are a plague on the earth that are using up the earth and poisoning it, and we will pass to, and the earth will recover its beauty and its strength when we are gone. He also felt that the universe was one being, one organism, and that everything is in touch with everything else, and that this is physics as well as religion. There's the whole family, 3 generations with the babies. I believe that's Lindsay Jeffers in the Irish cradle, right in the foreground. Lindsay, who grew up to teach English at Stevenson School for 30 years. Okay, and they've moved the melodeon to a very prominent position for this photo. This might have been the Vanity Fair spread that was done. There were 4 of them in the house, one in the dining room, one upstairs, one in the sitting room, and one in the tower. These were missionary reed organs, little pump organs. This one was made 4 missionaries going from Boston to India. Una bought them secondhand in San Francisco. They're like giant harmonicas. You have to have an airflow going through to make the metal reed vibrate. And they're perfect for missionaries because they're portable, lightweight, and they don't go out of tune. The tuning is fixed. There's the one in the parlor, which is the one I play when we do musical tours. That one functions very well. And that one was made in Brattleboro, Vermont, went to China, and then came on a sailing ship back to San Francisco, where she picked it up for a little bit of nothing. That one, the Tower Melodeon, has been worm-eaten. It was almost destroyed, and they moved it from the tower to the guest bedroom. And the beautiful Steinway, okay, which has been completely redone. She was a good pianist. You know, she practiced very conscientiously when she was an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley, and I think she had it in her mind that she might need to rely on that someday for income. So she was prepared to be a teacher. She played the Bach preludes. She kept the well-tempered clavier on the desk of the piano all the time as a, I don't know if it was a status symbol showpiece or if she actually played from it every day, but she kept that on the piano, and she also kept the Chopin preludes. So we have put together some poems of Jeffers with music that she played. These are pieces in her library and pieces that she played by her favorite composers like Edward MacDowell and Bach and Chopin. First, I'll play for you the Bach C major prelude. This I know she played in the well-tempered clavier. It was the one piece that was the most dog-eared, and the corner of the page was a little bit dirty. So I knew she played that one for sure. The other ones, some of the pages look pristine, just 100 years old. So here's the C major prelude. And that leads perfectly to the Chopin C minor prelude and a poem by Jeffers called Harder Than Granite.
It is a pity the shock waves of the present population explosion must push in here too. They will certainly, within a century, eat up the old woods I planted, and throw down my stonework. Only the little tower, 4 foot thick walled and useless, may stand for a time. That and some verses. It is curious that flower-soft verse is sometimes harder than granite, tougher than a steel cable, more alive than life.
There's another wonderful Chopin prelude, which I don't think Una played, but I think it captures something of their two personalities. You know, he was an intensely introverted man, almost monosyllabic. She was completely the opposite, voluble, socially very gifted, and wanting to connect to everyone, and could talk a blue streak, and charming, and anxious to know everyone's story. If she met you, she would pull out of you in 5 minutes, you know, most of your life story. So she's full of words, and he has very few to spend every day. So as she played the Chopin preludes, you can figure out who's who from this one. This is C sharp minor. One beautiful poem he wrote on the 9th anniversary of them living in that house by the ocean. The boys are 12. It's the year before they go to Ireland, and he's written this wonderful poem as a love poem to the ocean.
9th anniversary. Only a fortnight out of 9 years has found me afield from the ocean cliff where I perched my house. And long before that, I lived in hearing of the long voice and thunder of the shore. Yet to this hour, I never look west, but shaken with the joyful shock of astonishment by dark nor by day. There the most glorious creature on earth shines in the nights, or glitters in the suns, or feels of its stone in the blind fog, or shakes its hair in the storms. I never wake in my bed, but surprised with pleasure to hear it speaking. An east wind brings me the smell of the river. All the others carry the sea fragrances, the salt and the sea wings.
Una loved this piece by Edward MacDowell called Scotch Poem, which describes a storm at sea and a woman in a tower singing a sad song out of the high window of the tower. It's not hard to imagine she could envision herself in that role. So here's Edward MacDowell's Scotch Poem, which she played and loved. Their evening routine was after supper, in front of the fireplace, she would sew, he would read aloud. They read everything by Thomas Hardy, everything by Sir Walter Scott, all of the adventure books like The Count of Monte Cristo and The Man in the Iron Mask, but also Dostoevsky and poetry and serious things. And then the boys went to bed, she sang them to sleep, and she came back downstairs. And she and Robin would share a drink by the fire. She loved Irish whiskey, of course, and he liked red wines. They made their own homemade red wine. And if they were in the mood and not too tired, they would go to the guest bedroom and make love. He wrote a beautiful poem to her in 1941 for Una, which was a terrifying time. She had found out that she had breast cancer for the first time. It was the beginning of World War II. The dog had just died. Their beloved English bulldog had just died. This was 1941, before Pearl Harbor. And he writes this poem for Una.
These are the falling years. They will go deep. Never weep, never weep. With clear eyes explore the pit. Watch the great fall with religious awe. It is not Europe alone that is falling to blood and fire. Decline and fall have been dancing in all men's souls for a long time. Tonight, dear, let's forget all that and the war, and annihilate ourselves a little beyond time. You with this Irish whiskey, I with red wine. While the stars go over the sleepless ocean, sometime after midnight, I'll pluck you a wreath of chosen ones. We'll talk about love and death, rock-solid themes, old and deep as the sea. Admit nothing more timely, nothing less real, while the stars go over the timeless ocean. And when they vanish, we'll have spent the night well.
That is Chopin's Prelude in C major, which I think she played also. Let's go back to the image stream. Old Una in the tower at her melodeon with her book of Gaelic airs, which I was lucky enough to find a copy of this. Only 500 facsimile copies were made in 1989, and you can still find them online from places like Abe Books and secondhand dealers. Okay, next one. Robin's calligraphy and sketches. Every page of this book is decorated. It was a project of maybe 5 years to finish it. It was almost 200 pages. And the Song of Una with a unicorn. You can remember it's Una, not Una. Una like unicorn. And there's the one I played for you on like the Irish Celtic scale, sounds like pentatonic scale with a unicorn drawn by Robin. That's the spinning wheel that's in the dining room. It was her grandmother's spinning wheel, and the cradle, the baby cradle in the right-hand corner of the lullaby is the cradle that is in the house. This charcoal sketch of Yeats by Sargent hangs over Una's desk in Tor House, right next to that little etching of the house by the wind-swept rocky shore. And Robin did the sketch of Yeats's Tower in Ireland. Sketches by the boys too. Everybody had to contribute. No one was immune from this. Both Donnan and Garth had to make a drawing. Okay, now to the actual music in the archives. We'll just go quickly through so you can see what was there and the shape that it's in and the variety of her library, the depth. Okay, so their dear friend Noel Sullivan, extremely important friend, wonderful singer, very rich and very supportive of them, came and sang often with Una. He also organized the Christmas Eve service at the Carmel Mission and sang for 13 seasons with the Carmel Bach Festival. He had a big house in San Francisco on Hyde Street where Una stayed when she went up to, say, go to the symphony and hear George Gershwin, and a house in Carmel Valley, Hidden Hills, where Charlie Chaplin often came to stay and play tennis. Una did not approve of Charlie Chaplin, but Noel was their great friend and accompanied them on a 1941 road trip to Washington, D.C. So they sang often. He would have been her partner for the Irish ballads and all kinds of things, ancient Irish music and Danny Boy. Grieg was her favorite composer, strangely. So she had all the little short lyrical pieces and songs of Grieg. There's a wonderful Grieg song, Ich liebe dich, I love you, which was Grieg's wedding present to his wife, Nina, which Noel Sullivan sang, and is so appropriate for them because since they met in the German class at USC, she was the best person in the class until Robin showed up. He had registered late, and then when he showed up, she was really irritated because she was no longer in first place because he had gone to school in Europe and spoke perfect European German from having gone to German boarding schools. So let's do Ich liebe dich.
Du mein Gedanke, du mein Sein und Werden, du meines Herzens bester Seligkeit. Ich liebe dich wie nichts auf dieser Erde. Ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit. Ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit.
I love you now and for all time. After Grieg, Elgar, she has all kinds of English music as well. There's a Chopin Polonaise. That was actually Annie Tuttle's book, that Chopin Polonaise collection. So Annie Tuttle must have been pretty respectable pianist. Debussy and MacDowell, she had very modern things. To have the Children's Corner Suite was quite advanced at that time. And the C pieces, I played through the Scotch poem of MacDowell. She also had the Mother Goose Suite, Ma Mère Loi, of Maurice Ravel, that was like avant-garde music at that time. It's a 4-hand set of pieces, and she probably played them with Noel Sullivan. Also the Paderewski Minuet. And she even had the Rachmaninoff C-sharp minor prelude. Okay. That's pretty ambitious for her. Now we get to the visitors. We've had such a stream of visitors. Tor House is a shrine. People make pilgrimages to. Here's Judy Collins visiting Tor House in 2017. Just one of many. Albert Bender and Ansel Adams. Okay, Ansel Adams came in 1926 in June for the first time. This is Ansel's professional photo, his headshot, as you will, in 1922. He was not yet a world famous career photographer. He was practicing the piano 5 hours a day, planning to be a classical pianist, perhaps a concert pianist. He had a good German teacher, and he had spent all his money on a lovely Kanabi piano at his parents' home in San Francisco. Albert Bender is an extraordinary man. He was from Dublin, a Jew, rich in the insurance and commercial real estate business in San Francisco, and a huge patron of the arts, photographers and poets and writers. And he took young Ansel and said, there's some people you need to meet. I have a car, but I don't know how to drive. So if you drive, we'll go to Carmel this weekend and I'll introduce you. And he took him to meet the Jeffers. And there's a wonderful account of this first meeting in Ansel's autobiography. He then had to play for the Jeffers. He had to play for a supper kind of thing. So I will play for you my best guess of what the two pieces are that he played that day in 1926.
Promptly at 4, Una Jeffers appeared and greeted us. She was a slight, though striking woman of great poise and charm. She led us into the house where Jeffers was awaiting us, a tall man with a hard face and a bold shock of hair. Quiet and shy in manner and voice, he possessed a strange presence with his rugged features and relentless glance. He grasped Albert's hand in welcome and turned to me. Albert introduced us, and with a faint suggestion of relaxed eyes and lips, Jeffers murmured, "Glad you could come." I sensed a power of personality that I have rarely felt. We had nothing important to say to each other at the time, so we said nothing. One did not make small talk with Robinson Jeffers. Later, Albert asked me to play. I was tense, but I knew my notes. I played a section of a Bach partita, then a Mozart sonata, and I recalled the performance as creditable. Una was touchingly appreciative, and Albert was beaming. Jeffers said, "Good." When we departed for San Francisco at dusk, I felt I was leaving new and truly warm friends.
Jeffers also gave him a copy of Rundstellen and inscribed it to him. They became very close friends. Of course, the Adams later moved down and built a house on Carmel Point and were very close friends. He often photographed Robin as well. But on this day, he's a young man who's nervously trying to make a good first impression. My best guess is he would have played an impressive movement from the Bach partitas. And the one I've selected is the Sinfonia from the C minor partita. It's in 3 sections, a French overture, an andante, and then a very lively 2-part fugue. And then to balance the drama of C minor Bach, C major Mozart, I'll just do the exposition of the Sonata in C, K330. left off with Ansel Adams, and then this next ones are his wife, Virginia. Virginia founded the Virginia Best Adams Masterclass at the Carmel Bach Festival for many years. Yeah, there's Ansel looking very like the famous photographer now. Portrait of Jeffers, 1927. And there's Laughing Albert, delightful guy. Ansel with a full beard there on the left. I haven't often see that one. Noel Sullivan, so important. And that huge portrait hangs in Tor House in the little book room that used to be the kitchen. He was quite amazing. He had a large black staff, a chauffeur and butler and cooks, and he put up all the famous black singers and actors and people who would come to San Francisco who couldn't stay in a hotel because of the segregation laws at that time. So he put them up in his Hyde Street mansion, also Carmel Valley. And when Langston Hughes came to Carmel, he gave him a house rent-free on Guadalupe Street for 2 years. 2 years. So a very generous, very liberal, open-minded man. Loved the Jeffers and helped them. There's the Hyde Street mansion. I just Googled this. It's quite impressive. This is where Una stayed when she went up to the city for shopping or for a concert, so the George Gershwin concert. And there's with Charlie Chaplin and the famous writers, and Langston Hughes and Una drinking wine right from the bottle on the beach. Famous picture. Langston Hughes was a frequent visitor to Tor House in those 2 years he was here. The great room at Hollow Hills, Hidden Hills, is now Carmel Valley Manor. And he had an organ, you can see an organ there on the right, and a big piano as well. This was where they had the house concerts. Horowitz, nobody knows if he actually came to Tor House. He did make his first West Coast tour, played for the Carmel Music Society and Teddy Custer's Theater in December 14th, but the Jeffers hadn't yet returned from that first Irish visit. They didn't get home till New Year's Eve or January 1st. So they missed this. So I don't think Horowitz played the Steinway at Tor House unless Teddy took him and let him in. I don't know why he would do that. And the Gershwins, yes, wonderful. Decade of huge hits on Broadway, huge moneymakers, national celebrities. Gershwin was on the cover of Time magazine. There he is, handsome young thing, very ambitious. Of course, you know you're a celebrity when Hirschfeld makes a cartoon of you. Couldn't be more flattering. Then he wrote Porgy and Bess, and it was a financial flop. He had this huge string of successes, starting with Rhapsody in Blue, the Concerto in F, American in Paris, and then Porgy and Bess, which he felt was his best work, but which flopped, and he lost a bundle of money. So he came out west to Los Angeles to write movie music. And I have pictures of him at his home in LA. He came out and it was like a midlife crisis. Why did Porgy and Bess fail? He's playing tennis with Arnold Schoenberg. He's reading Robinson Jeffers. He's painting. He's trying to write music for RKO, and he's working on a musical called The Goldwyn Follies of 1937. There he is with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and the two Gershwin boys in there. Look like they're jamming, nice publicity pictures. And that Follies of 37 had fabulous new songs, including Love Walked In and Our Love Is Here to Stay. And Una went to a concert in San Francisco. She went to a Saturday matinee where he played the symphony. They played the Concerto in F and conducted the suite from Porgy and Bess. He was not going to let go of that. And then Gershwin came down to Carmel for tea. He wanted to meet Robinson Jeffers. He had been reading the poetry, and he was very curious. And he came, another wonderful portrait, and he played the Steinway at Tor House, and he sang fragments of the songs he was working on for this new show. Nice work if you can get it. And Love Walked In, and Our Love Is Here to Stay. And we're going to do Our Love Is Here to Stay for you because it is the most extraordinary thing. It is the pop culture version of the Jeffers philosophy, which is that love endures, that everything in the world is transient and unimportant, and that history is seen from the framework of geological time. Listen to the words of this. We'll perform it for you now. See if you don't agree.
the less I comprehend the world and all its capers, and how it all will end. Nothing seems to be lasting, but that isn't our affair. We've got something permanent, I mean in the way we can. It's very clear our love is here to stay, not for a year, but ever and a day. The radio and the telephone and the movies that we know may just be passing fancies, and in time may go. But oh my dear, our love is here to stay. Together we're going a long, long way. In time the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble, they're only made of clay. But our love is here to stay.
Beautiful Gershwin, who then died of a brain tumor July 11th of 37 after he had been to Tor House, but the music won the Academy Award for Best Musical Score. Now there he is. How shocking. And Charlie Chaplin, frequent visitor because he was very, very constant visitor at Noel Sullivan's place. He also visited, but Una did not think he was a serious person. She quite disapproved of him. He came and visited, and what he did for them was entertain them with comic impersonations of Hitler and Mussolini. He had just finished Modern Times, and he was already thinking about The Great Dictator as his next movie project. And Toscanini came for tea. He neither sang nor played. They just came for tea. Toscanini wanted to beat Robinson Jeffers. Imagine. And Giancarlo Menotti and Samuel Barber spent 2 months here in the summer of 1941, were frequent visitors to Tor House. Oh, Starry Night. Jeffers, he didn't love music. He tolerated it because he loved Una. So we'll let him have a last word. He often refers to music in his poetry, the music of nature. This poem is called October Weekend, and the music is Prokofiev and a popular song from 1934, the year this poem was written.
October Weekend. It is autumn still, but at 3 in the morning, all the magnificent wonders of midwinter midnight, blue dog star, Orion, red Aldebaran, the ermine fur Pleiades parading above the gable of the house. Their music is their shining. And the house beats like a heart with dance music, because our boys have grown to the age when girls are their music. There is wind in the trees, and the gray ocean's music on the rock. I'm warming my blood with starlight, not with girls' eyes. But really, the night is quite mad with music.
We would love to send you out today with an Irish blessing. What could be more appropriate for Una and Robin?
the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your fields. Until we meet again, my friend, until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your fields. Till we meet again, we meet